Hello and welcome to the Mysticast, where you join me, Jack Stafford, a student of metaphysics, as we talk to a variety of guests to better understand the truths and teachings given by the Masters through the Aetherius Society, the new cosmic religion for the Aquarian Age, incorporating all yogas, Christian mysticism, theosophy, UFOs, and much, much more. Please note, this is an independent program, not produced or fact-checked by the Aetherius Society. Today, our guest is psychic explorer Mark Antony. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Jack. Thank you for having me on. I've been looking forward to doing this podcast with you.
That's a big thing for you to say because you do a lot of interviews.
Well, I do, but Aetherius Society and what it stands for, I find extremely enlightening. And throughout my work as a medium, as a researcher, near-death experience researcher, paranormal investigator, afterlife science researcher, it seems that pretty much the concepts that the Aetherius Society embraces are in alignment with what I've discovered through my own personal experiences, as well as my scientific and spiritual research. So that's why I've been looking forward to this, because it's nice to, quote unquote, preach to the choir, if you will, to a receptive, because a lot of the interviews that I do, many are on paranormal shows like Coast to Coast AM, which I absolutely love. Wonderful show. Yeah. In fact, I'll be doing an episode. I know we're recording this, but tonight I'll be on there discussing my theories on reincarnation.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which I know is another Aetherius Society concept. But then other shows that I appear on are very mainstream. So I'm constantly having to justify my existence to people who A, have no knowledge of metaphysics or psychic phenomenon, B, outright reject it, or C, think it is somehow negative. And so it's really nice to get past that and talk directly to an audience who is well-versed and educated in these fields.
Oh, that's great. I mean, it's you've had such a long life journey. This time around, of course.
Yeah.
You're born into a family of psychics, fourth generation. And you chose the path of law, so you could have chosen, with your personality and intelligence, you could have chosen many different fields, and that's really interesting that you chose law. Why was that?
I'm laughing because when I was, like you said, I was born into a family of psychic mediums. My father was a U.S. Navy SEAL and then later an aerospace engineer. And my mother was a commercial illustrator, artist, and fashion designer. So it's not like, they were running a shop with a neon hand in the window saying psychic readings. That was totally not what our family was. And I've tracked these abilities back 4 generations. So I was raised in the Catholic faith, but my dad was of a Protestant faith. But despite that, we took a very interfaith position in my family. Yeah, because look, when you see spirits, it's really hard to get pigeonholed into one particular thought. And as I started getting older, when I was in my teenage years, Jack, I was very drawn to going into the clergy. Now, I was thinking perhaps in the Catholic Church. But then once again, I was a teenage boy and the idea of celibacy wasn't exactly resonating with me. Also, by that time, I was already exploring other belief systems, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, spiritualism, and I felt that the clergy, particularly the Catholic Church, had too many rules and regulations. So I ended up going into law. I mean, talk about jumping out of one pile of rules and regulations right into another. But I was drawn to law because I've always enjoyed public speaking and advocating. I like the intellectual aspects of research. Plus, it puts you in everything. Throughout my legal career, I had to work. I was a prosecuting attorney working for the state of Florida. Then I became a criminal defense attorney and complex civil litigation personal injury attorney. I had to work with neuroscientists about the human brain, forensics, chemists, physicists, biologists, accident reconstructionists. I mean, it gave me the ability to study and immerse myself in so many different disciplines. And then there came a point in my life And then if you want, we can get into that, what caused me to transition out of it.
So just to ask you the question that you always get asked when you were doing these defense cases, or did you see, when you have psychic experiences, you know what I'm asking, do you see
Yeah.
did you get to speak to the victim?
I could feel their presence around, and there were times when, here's the thing. When I was a prosecutor, if you feel like you're the white knight galloping to save the day because you're going after the bad guy. And what I used my abilities more for were selecting juries, and also for getting insights into things. And people have a misnomer about psychic ability. They think that it somehow makes us omnipresent, all-seeing and all-knowing.
Yeah.
It gives us insights. Plus, when I'm doing a reading and connecting with spirits, and it needs to be in a distraction-free environment, and the legal system is about as filled with distractions as it can possibly be. So to answer your question directly, yes, but that didn't always determine what type of case I was going to take. However, throughout the course of my career, when I started defending people accused of crimes, I would not represent child molesters or rapists. There's an aura about them. There's a feel. When they would walk in the office, it was just, ew. I just could not bring myself to do that. So I would refer them to law firms who would do those things. In exchange, they would refer me types of cases that they didn't necessarily want to work on.
Because they have to have a defender. It's the law. They have to have somebody fighting their corner. Yeah.
Right. And as an attorney, I'm not supposed to sit in judgment of my client, but I'm also a human being.
Yeah.
And when I get somebody in there, and I knew what they did, I could see it and feel it.
Yeah.
But also I was able to help people too. I remember I had this young guy in my office, and he had to be about maybe 20, 21. And I was looking at his arrest record. I was looking at his criminal history. And so he had been arrested on a driving under the influence, drunk driving charge. And then about a year before that, some marijuana charges and a couple other drug charges. But there was nothing before that. And it's like, okay, so, and then all of a sudden around him, I felt right behind him and on his right side, because like when my right hand tingles, that's a spirit connected with the client's mother's side of the family.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Left hand tingles, that's their father's side of the family. And my right hand was tingling big time. And I was getting this female energy, and I'm looking at her, and I said, who died about 2 years ago? And he goes, my mother. And then he was looking at me and looking over his shoulder, and he said, you see things other people don't you? And I said, well, yeah. And then he burst into tears, and he said, when my mom died, my world fell apart. He said, she was a single mom. I don't know who my dad was. We were very close, and she died of cancer. And since that time, I just can't hold it together. And so what happened there, Jack, is I realized, and I started seeing a reoccurring pattern in drug addicts, alcoholics, people who get arrested for certain types of impulsive behaviors, that there was an unresolved grief issue in their background. Now, granted, in a DUI, a drunk driving under the influence case, part of the sentence is to get them into some type of counseling for the alcohol. But I always also try to get my clients into grief counseling, because you have to get to the root of the problem. Why are they drinking? Why are they doing drugs? And so in my second to last book, The Evidence of Eternity, I introduced the concept of grief, crime, grief. And what I found is that people, children, young adults who have an unresolved grief, it could be a parent, a sibling, grandparent, even a beloved pet that they haven't dealt with, that grief leads to behaviors that drift them into criminal activity, which in turn leads them to inflicting grief upon somebody else. I mean, let's face it, people don't wake up one day and say, I think I'll become an alcoholic, or I'll start shooting heroin. They do it because they're hurting, and they start to self-medicate, which is the worst way to deal with it. And so they get behind the wheel of a car, and then they end up killing somebody because they're drunk. Grief, crime, grief. And so we have to break the cycle of grief, crime, grief, and that can be achieved through counseling. Spirit communication is an important therapeutic step in the journey through grief. So there's a number of things that we can do. And I think it's extremely important when there is a loss in a family and there are children. A lot of people kind of think, well, the kids will adapt, they'll get through it. You need to talk to your children. You can't just, you can't ignore grief. You can't suppress it. You can't avoid it. You can't out snort it, smoke it, drink it, because it's going to emerge in the form of alcoholism, drug addiction, sexual impulsivity, stealing things, all types of impulsive behaviors. And so that was one of the ways that I was using my ability in the practice of law, was detecting this. And instead of, thrusting a reading at somebody who wasn't necessarily there for that, instead guiding them into the proper counseling.
Sounds like everyone should be psychic, in this work.
Well, certainly there's a lot of intuition. It's funny because women will accept they have women's intuition, and men who are, involved with women will realize that. But guys have to realize we have it too. And I work a lot with men, but see, we have to frame it differently. Guys, we have instinct. Yeah. Okay. Denzel, Chris Pratt, Harrison Ford, Sean Connery, they have instinct. You know what I mean? The characters that they play. And if you talk to any first responder, if you talk to anybody in the military, every single one of them will tell you got to trust your gut. You got to trust your gut.
Yeah, there's so many things I want to talk to about that. We've only got a very short time, but that's great. What you're doing with your work is you're pulling back the veil of ignorance, and we're told by the masters through the Aetherius Society that ignorance is the only crime in our world. If you, so I wanted to talk to you about the life between lives, because many people understand about reincarnation, and they, that they worry about what they were in past lives, but what about the other realms, the spirit realms? I've been told that the movie Astral City, which is a Brazilian movie, don't know if you've seen that one.
That one I haven't, but my research, one of the lectures that I give, I also write about this in my latest book, The Afterlife Frequency. I talk about the NDE zone. All right, there's our material world, and then there is the afterlife frequency, the other side, the collective consciousness. And in the zone in between, it's the frequency in between. That's where near-death experiences occur. That's where out-of-body experiences, that's where we communicate with spirits, deathbed visions, shared death experiences. And it's an overlap of the frequencies. To make it simple, think of our material world as AM radio, the other side as FM radio. So the two systems are energetic based on frequency and vibration. Obviously, AM has a lower frequency. FM radio has a higher frequency, but spirit communication, near-death experiences, share death, OBEs, deathbed visions all occur when there is an overlap of the two frequencies.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're tuning in. That's the tuning in part that
we're tuning in. Well, think about it. When somebody has a near-death experience, all right, we hear about they separate from the body. There's the floating sensation. Then they may feel as if they're going through a tunnel into the light, and then they will encounter deceased loved ones. And then there's stages to it. And not all of them go to the full stages where you get to the loved ones who've passed into encounters with the divine power that we can call God. Sometimes people just get the floating sensation. Sometimes they get, different factors in it. But when people get to that point and they're encountering people who have loved ones who have died, all right, this is all in the NDE zone, and then they come back. What I do as a medium is I deal with them after they keep going. Okay. Think of a near-death experience as kind of a rubber band. It's like, you go up and you touch the other side and then you come back. And NDEs, I think, are one of our most persuasive forms of proving the existence of the soul, the afterlife, reincarnation. And everybody who's had a near-death experience, one of the after effects is belief in reincarnation, even for people who that was not even a factor in their belief system. And so reincarnation is a really fascinating topic. Obviously, we could do an entire show just on that.
Yeah, well, it's very important because, you know, when you talk to some mediums, you understand the spirit world as being this kind of place where people are floating around as ovoids, or they're not really there. But in our teaching, we understand that each chakra is a realm of consciousness. So when you die, you go to a different frequency of manifestation. But you drive a car there. You have a house. It's a life. It's an existence.
Well, what I've found, people think that, but when we're interfacing with spirits, they will portray those things because what they're doing is they're creating a point of reference that we can relate to. In the afterlife frequency, I introduce my electromagnetic soul theory.
Okay, yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
Okay. Everything we know is made of molecules, which in turn are made of atoms, which in turn are composed of electrons, protons, and neutrons, which in turn are composed of the smallest particle known as a quantum, ergo quantum physics, and it's pure electromagnetic energy. And another side effect of an NDE is we're all interconnected. Well, we know that everything is on the most basic subatomic level a quantum. So that means our bodies, our brains, the air we breathe, the light we see, the rings of Saturn and beyond are all electromagnetic energy. Now, for our science friends, an electron is a quantum because an electron is 1/1800th the size of a proton. All right, so we've covered all that. We know from the law of thermodynamics and physics, energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transferred from one form to another. Every great spiritual teacher has taught us that the soul, the consciousness, pre-exists the body, comes into the body, moves on after the body dies. So the brain does not create consciousness, it merely hosts it. Similar to the way your computer hard drive did not create the operating system, the Windows or whatever program you're using, it merely hosts it. So when the brain/hard drive dies, the EMS, the electromagnetic soul, pure consciousness, which is eternal electromagnetic energy, moves on. It uploads to another frequency. So now spirits, being pure electromagnetic energy, move at the speed of light. They're part of the collective consciousness. They're energetically linked to other spirits, linked to other spirits, linked to other spirits. They can move at speeds we can't comprehend. They can experience things we can't even begin to fathom. So when they're communicating with us, they're going to create a point of reference that our EMS is contained in a brain, which is a hosting device, which also governs our material world perceptions, limited to our 5 physical senses of sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. So could you possibly understand what it's like to be able to move at the speed of light, be interconnected with every form of intelligence everywhere, and be multidimensional? No. So they will create a cafe in Italy where you go to see them and they're drinking wonderful wine and maybe they're driving a Ferrari, and we can relate to that. We can relate to that as opposed to that's actually what they're doing, because what they're doing is really a lot cooler than all of that. But you and I wouldn't begin to be able to understand it. It would be like putting a kindergartner, an average intelligence kindergartner, into a postgraduate level quantum physics class. They're not, they may see the desk and the blackboard or whiteboard and maybe a laptop or two, but they're not going to have any idea what's really going on there. And so that has been my experience. And I could go on and on with why I think that way. So first off, there's nothing wrong with having that construct. But we have to realize that once we leave the material world, we're evolving into a much more elevated state of existence. That's my experience. Okay. And I'm sure there's people who will disagree with me, and they're welcome to.
Well, it's crazy that you and I have to wonder about where we spent half our existence is on the other realms. Probably, I understand it's more or less. If you're very evolved, you spend a long time on the other realms. If you're very involved, you can spend a longer time. Like the black magicians spend a longer time, because time is also different on the lower realms. But if you're very attached to the physical realm, you come back quite quickly. So
Yeah,
That's
and
crazy.
it is crazy. We've seen that in a lot of cases of reincarnation. A really fascinating one occurred in the mid 1960s. There was this little girl named Reena Gupta, and around 4 years old, she started saying to her parents, "This is not where I'm supposed to live. Um, I have a husband and I have 4 children." And she started going on, and it was very detailed. And she lived in New Delhi. Well, having Hindu parents, they were like, okay, that's not an unusual thing when your child in India starts talking about reincarnation. If it happened in the United States at the same time in the 60s, it'd be like, well, she's crazy and, it's possessed by demons and blah, blah, blah. All right. So she's in India, and word starts spreading through New Delhi. And then there's a Sikh family. And the people who follow the Sikh religion also believe in reincarnation. Now, Reena Gupta said that her husband in the prior life murdered her. Okay. Well, the Sikh family's daughter had died just a few years before, and she had 4 children, 3 girls and a boy, and her husband, I think his name was Surdeep, murdered her. So they decided to pay a call on Reena's family, and they arrived in an afternoon. The little girl was asleep, and the parents brought her in. And when she woke up from her nap, she looked at the Sikh couple and said, "Mother, father." She identified them as her parents, and she even knew the nickname of their other daughter, which would have been her little sister. Long story short, she started revealing more and more details. Meanwhile, Surdeep, who was serving a life sentence for murdering his wife and her brother, stabbing them to death, for good behavior, was released early, and he wanted to meet her. So now she's 11 years old, and they arrange a meeting. And the pictures they have, you can see her. They're trying to put her in a chair next to him, and she's pulling away. And when he went to put his arm around her, she shrieks, "He'll kill me again." So I always thought that was a very fascinating story because, like you said, she was very attached to that prior life because there was the unresolved, I was murdered by him.
Yeah, but that's the reason we must forget our past lives, most people, because we'd be wandering around trying to reclaim our lost property and our inheritance rights we'd get into fights. It would just be a disaster.
It would, and yet there are several people who do remember these prior lives.
I think to show it's possible, like, as in a way. But I think when I got into the Aetherius Society, you talked about FM and AM radio, and we talked about the electromagnetic spectrum. So life exists, consciousness exists at different frequencies, like you were explaining. So we can only see a tiny fraction of the electromagnetic spectrum. But that's what, I didn't know what connected UFOs with ghosts or life on the other realms. Is that when we go to Mars, we don't see anyone at our frequency, because they've evolved above it. All the other planets, it's like Dr. King said when he was at school, if the other planets are all empty, why did God make them? I mean, it doesn't make sense. There's life everywhere. You go in the bottom of the sea, there's life. You go to the top of the mountain, there's life on our world. So it's the same if you change frequency, if you change the dial, like people can do astral projection, they confirm this. So
that's a really good point, Jack, because and it's very normal and natural for humans to do this. We classify things on the basis of what we know. I don't know if you can see on the shelf behind me, I got a bunch of little dinosaurs back there. I always collected stuff like that when I was a kid. Well, if you see the dinosaurs are standing erect with their tails dragging on the ground, now they're portrayed as the tail being used for balance, more like birds. And historically, dinosaurs were simply thought to be lizards. I mean, that's what the name dinosaur means, thunder lizard, because they're so big, they walk like that. And now, more recent discoveries, it appears that they were much more avian, much more bird-like. Now, so we went from classifying them as lizards. Now we're classifying them as bird-like. It's possible they were neither. They could have been a completely different classification. we have, within a century, we meaning scientists, have changed our perception of what dinosaurs were. And we're doing the same in afterlife studies, which is a much more ethereal. I love the name Aetherius Society because definitely it's an ethereal. But historically, the way spirits were looked at, it's being viewed in some ways differently, and in other ways, it's very similar. I mean, when Jesus was speaking to his apostles, and he said that basically once he ascended, once he after the crucifixion, he comes back. He said, "I'll be closer to you than ever before," and the interpretation of that in some Christian circles is that as a spirit, he'll be closer to you. And we now know, at least I know, and my colleagues who are mediums and afterlife scientists, spirits are around us all the time. It's just whether or not we're able to perceive them. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that your loved ones are hanging out with you 24/7 because they're moving at the speed of light. So let's say at the time it takes you to take a sip of coffee, one of your spirits could have been back and forth to the moon 7 times because that's how fast they move. So they don't need to be hanging out with you all the time. They can pop in, pop out, see what's going on. Plus, they're doing, once again, things that we can't necessarily understand. They talk about growth, learning, evolution. Once again, those are terms we're able to relate to.
I think the speed of mind is 4,000 times the speed of light. I've heard that said by the masters, and the scientists. What the metaphysician knows today, the scientist knows tomorrow, and they're talking about dark matter, dark energy, and these crazy way out scientists. What are they called? The most I've forgotten the name of it, but these branches of science which are quantum scientists. They're predicting, because the soul creates the spirit creates the soul as a vehicle for Shakti consciousness, and then the soul we have 7 bodies. We have the physical, the etheric, the astral, the mental, and I've heard that on other planets and in the past on this world that people could have a physical body and in internal organs could be an astral or etheric, so you can become lighter than the physical body. And I think the Adamic man who was on this world before us, before Maldek man, because we came from the Maldek, which is now the asteroid belt, they had their lowest chakra was the heart chakra. So all the organs below us, the digestive organs, the reproductive organs, the Adamic man didn't need these because they were much more evolved. So we've evolved, we've been involved into more materialistic aspects and lost many of our etheric aspects. And I think on the other worlds as well, they're in contact continuously with their other aspects on the other realms. So here we have the soul is kind of almost asleep, I think, and we have an astral experience, and then a physical experience, and then an astral experience or an etheric experience, and then we come back here. But that's just because we're very involved. We're the most basic classroom in the solar system.
Well, we got to start somewhere. And we may not be, because we may be a continuation from something from another realm as well. Because what you're describing with all these different levels, there's a multi-dimensional aspect to the EMS, to the electromagnetic soul. And the string theorists that talk about there's not just one universe, but there's parallel universes and dimensions. And that may sound whacked out and difficult for a lot of people to understand. But if you look at some of the things that we take for granted right now, 100 years ago, that was looked at as crazy. Nikola Tesla was interviewed in 1926, and he said, with the advancement of, he said, television and telephony, one day a man will be able to carry a device that will fit in his breast pocket, which will enable him to communicate with people all over the world. Mm-hmm. Now, they were looking at him like, yeah. It's like, hello, cell phones. Okay, but see, Tesla was one of those people who thought in this. Well, he was a genius, and you know, people say, well, that's really difficult to understand. Is when I give lectures and talks, and I try to explain very rudimentary, my rudimentary understanding of the theory of relativity, and people say, well, that's really hard to wrap your head around. It's like, yeah, no kidding. It took Albert Einstein to come up with it. You know, it's there are certain people like Einstein, like Feynman, like Heisenberg, like Oppenheimer, like Tesla, like Michio Kaku, who have that ability to tune into this multi-dimensionalism, and it gives them these concepts and these ideas. And so it's really fascinating because you know, Einstein came up with the theory of gravitational waves. He said that when two black holes collide, they will send out gravitational waves, which will bend and curve the space-time continuum and affect us. Well, in 2016, LIGO, the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Observatory, detected gravitational waves that came from a collision of two black holes 1.8 billion light years away. And so I give this one lecture where I say, okay, 1.8 billion times the distance light travels in a year. And it's great because it's like this number with 21 zeros behind it. Oh, and it took me days. I mean, even my computer would say like there's too many zeros. It took me days to do this, and I had to, you know, check it several times. But the thing is, something that happened 1.8 billion years ago at distances that we can't even begin to comprehend was suddenly affecting us because the gravitational waves were coming through us. So it all gets back to an interconnectedness, and it all gets back to the quantum electromagnetic level. We really are interconnected. And I really wish more people on the planet would get the memo on that, so we'd stop trying to blow each other into oblivion. But I think that's part of the lessons of living in the material world. And it really is a shame because I saw an interview with Sir David Attenborough, one of my heroes. And he said, yes, going to Mars would be fascinating, all these other planets. He said, but look at where we live. He goes, it's so beautiful. And he said, and we're killing it.
Yeah, I mean, we believe in this society, the Mother Earth is a living being. And not only that, but one day we will evolve into planets that consciousness accumulates on its way back to God.
You know, I'm glad you said that because a couple years ago, it was 2017, no, 2018. It was 2018. I was in Hawaii and we were filming a proposed documentary, and Kilauea on the Big Island was in full eruption mode and hadn't erupted to that extent in decades. And my manager, Rocky, I don't know how she did it, but she got me and our cameraman on the special helicopter that Nat Geo and Smithsonian, you know, it wasn't the big bulky tourist helicopters. It was this real slim, it was kind of like a slim down Black Hawk helicopter. And the pilot was awesome. In fact, he trained U.S. Air Force helicopter pilots. The co-pilot, Mike Pritchard, is a legend in Hawaii. He was a scuba diver, and two of his other co-divers, they were drowning, and he risked his life to save them, and in turn got nitrogen narcosis. He was never supposed to walk again. He's walking. He fought real hard. He's using crutches. And then we had the tech engineer. Anyway, we were in this helicopter, and so we're flying from Hilo Airport to Kilauea, and there was rivers of lava hitting the ocean, towers of steam, and then the volcano itself. I mean, seeing lava shooting up into the sky, like, you know, and because of that, the lava is 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. When we opened up the helicopter door to film, we were at 3,000 feet. The heat was intense. And of course, Hawaii's weather is volatile anyway, but now you've got 2,000 degrees shooting up in the air, and it's causing all these currents, and we're bouncing all over the place. And here I am with all these big, tough military type guys, and even our cameraman. And here I am, the host, and I got to smile and say profound things, and I'm trying not to toss my breakfast. And I'm like, man, I can't toss my cookies in front of these tough guys. And I'm like, oh, okay, you know. And so I'm hanging on there. We're bouncing all over, and we're filming this. And then one of them said, Mark, do you feel anything as a psychic medium? And, you know, the Hawaiians believe that the goddess Pele is her heiau, her temple is Kilauea, and that she isn't the volcano. I mean, she doesn't live in the volcano. She is the volcano. She is the fire. She is, but even the non-native Hawaiians respect Pele. You know, and you hear about this, and you think, yeah, this is some primitive flaw. Then all of a sudden, I started feeling a consciousness, Jack, on a level I've never felt before. And I felt, in a sense, there was anger, because it was fascinating, because some of the rivers of lava destroyed a geothermal plant. And the geologists had theorized that, because you got to drill really deep to get down to the subterranean geothermal steam, that it destabilized subterranean structures, therefore triggering the volcanic eruption. But it's like a wave of lava specifically wiped this out. I felt anger, but then I also felt a sense of desperation and the pain of childbirth. I wasn't expecting this. And when I said this, the guys on board were like, well, then the pilot flew us over to where the lava was hitting the ocean. He said in the past couple weeks, the Big Island has increased a couple square miles, and every day is getting bigger. So literally, we were witnessing the birth of Earth on a scale probably not witnessed since like hundreds of millions of years. I mean, it was this mind-blowing experience. And I felt this. And so then we get back to Hilo Airport, and I'm like, thank God I didn't toss my cook. All these guys go, man, I thought I was going to hurl. You know, all of them were like that. I have never felt so manly before in my life.
Wow, it's wonderful to be able to experience something like that, because we're only told in the society, and like Dr. King, he takes energy into spiritual batteries, because he talked about spiritual energy and giving something back to Mother Earth. So he puts spiritual energy, prayer energy into batteries, and releases them in psychic centers of the Mother Earth.
Well, certainly, and being able to witness that on that scale. Now, with Mother Earth, when I was a little kid, and I remember I was getting ready to start Catholic school, my father said, don't talk about seeing spirits to anyone except your mother and I. Yeah, and it was perplexing to me, because in Catholic school, they talk about God and Mary and angels and saints and demons, and there's all these invisible things, but no, only people 2,000 years ago could see them. And, obviously I knew better. But then in my work, I started encountering elementals. And elementals are non-human spiritual intelligence that are associated with earth energy and nature energy.
The divas, yeah.
Fairies, sprites, leprechauns, elves. In Hawaii, the metahune. In Japan, the kami. In Hawaii, the aokua. I mean, everywhere you go, all over the world, there are these. And I was wondering, was Pele like the mega elemental?
Could be.
Is she?
Every mountain has a diva, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so, we have to be very careful about going in and saying, my way is the only way, and I know this, and I know that. I think that when approaching infinity, which is what we're doing with the study of metaphysical paranormal phenomenon, is we have to maintain an open-mindedness. One of the reasons I'm also known as a psychic lawyer, because obviously I'm a lawyer and I'm a psychic medium, but I'm just focusing on my mediumship now. So people contact me all the time, can you take over my case, and will we win? Because you'll know. And it's like, I don't want to deal with that. I want to help people cope with loss and pain. But the thing is, I also have a background in archaeology, philosophy, and science, and studying something like an elemental, studying a near-death experience, studying spirit phenomenon. I prefer employing the scientific method of objective observation. Let's collect the data. Then once we have it all collected, we can analyze it and we can come up with hypotheses and some conclusions, as opposed to telling people my way is right and your way is wrong.
Mm.
I mean, it's so funny when I deal with certain, like evangelicals, and they're like, they give you that look like, oh no, you're wrong. There's only one way to heaven. And it's like, really? So what you're telling me is not just in the universe, but in the multiverses and in the infinity of creation, everything is limited to your narrow interpretation.
It's just not logical.
It isn't logical. And obviously, if they want to believe that, we theoretically live in a free society, they should have the right to believe that. But I think that, George Harrison, the late great Beatle, said it best. All religions are branches of one big tree. It doesn't matter what you call God, so long as you call. So if you look at it that way, we're all brothers and sisters. Gandhi said that we're all brothers and sisters. So why do you raise your hand against your brother or sister simply because they call God by another name? And I've always believed in taking a very open-minded approach. A lot of quantum physicists, when they're discussing Hinduism, they say that if you take the cultural, and forgive me for our Hindu brothers and sisters, if you take the mythological component out of it and look at the recycling of energy, the discussions on reincarnation, the nature of creation, sustaining and destruction, and then rebirth, is so close to what quantum physicists have discovered.
The out-breath, the in-breath.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, this has been fascinating. Maybe just to end with, I could, because you started out as a Christian in the Catholic tradition. Yeah. This was channeled through Dr. King by the Master Jesus through Dr. King, and it gives a cosmic aspect to his original teachings. And because, like you said earlier as well about truth, you have to give a truth for the age. No, people
Yes.
have to. That Jesus came from Venus, that he was from the bright and morning star, and that he had, he could manifest his thoughts, he could walk on water. These are yogic abilities, and he talks here about the cosmic concept, about how the galaxy is a living being. Even the galaxy can't go back to God because it hasn't transmuted matter, and he talks about the earth, the sun as being the god of the Brahma and the Hindu scripts.
There you go.
In the Bible, yeah. So we now got a cosmic, and then it talks to the 12th blessing is the absolute, which is everything, which is,
yes,
this microphone, Venus, all the stars, and even that is just a fraction of the absolute. So
certainly. And it was fascinating in so many different belief systems. The ancient Egyptians had a trinity. The Hindus had the trinity of Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the sustainer, Shiva, the destroyer. Christianity, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. You go through so many of them, and there's this, it's basically the cycle, an unending cycle of life, birth, death, rebirth. And once again, that gets back to energies neither created nor destroyed, only transferred from one form to another.
Well, here you go. Just to one thing you really might appreciate. So the AUM, this is the, it says the I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, take it back closer to it. Yeah, there you are. There you are. Yeah. Oh, it just went out of focus. Yeah.
So it's,
yeah.
So we creation, preservation, transmigration. That's what.
There you go. Yep.
And then the new teachings given through the Aetherius Society: creation, preservation, transmutation. So you vibrate matter up to a higher frequency. We're here to evolve. We're here to spiritualize matter. It's an evolutionary process, not just a cycle, but a spiral.
Yep.
So that was one of the new teachings from the 9 Freedoms, which is another book channeled by Dr. King. Which I'll send you links to these. Maybe you think you'd really
and I discuss a lot of these concepts in all my books. My latest book is The Afterlife Frequency. The subtitle is The Scientific Proof of Spiritual Contact and How That Awareness Will Change Your Life. And I'm very honored that it was submitted for a Pulitzer Prize. It won Best Holistic Life's Metaphysical Book of the Year, the Cover Coalition of Visionary Resources Best Book About Reincarnation, and the OMI Award, sponsored by Ohm Times and iHeartMedia, as a metaphysical and inspirational book of the year. And I've been very, very honored because so many of the concepts that you're discussing, I have found in my research, and I also discuss. And I think that one thing I learned in law is, like, when a judge, at least a decent judge, is making a decision, that, let's say the decision's in the middle, there's input, factor coming from several different and diverse quarters. And when you start getting the same answer from different disciplines, different quarters, then that's it. Then that's it. And that's what we're seeing. That's what we're seeing with this. And even when you look at early Christianity, there were branches of Christianity within the first couple centuries that actually embraced reincarnation, a succession of lifetimes.
It was taken out in 400 AD.
Yeah. It's when the Roman Empire got hold of it, and they needed to make it an extension of imperial authority.
Makes sense. Take that. That would be the first thing I would cut. Yeah.
Well, the emperor Constantine was declared God's vicegerent on earth. In other words, God's representative. And so what they were saying is, yes, Jesus is now God and he will return, but until he does, the emperor of the Romans is his representative. And
just transitioned the Romans.
Smart. It was a brilliant political move. He also cast his mother Helena in the role of Mary, the mother of Jesus, because she was sent on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem and just happened to find the one true cross. So now they had the remnant. And you figure, all right, the emperor's mother shows up. She has probably at least 2,000 soldiers guarding her. And then there's the Roman legions that are stationed there and all the dignitaries. And they're like, well, here's the Golgotha. Here, dig over here, Your Majesty. Well, hey, look, it's the one true cross. It says right here, So now she has this holy relic, brings it back to Constantinople, the city of Constantine, because he even created a new capital for the empire. And then when you start seeing depictions in mosaics and paintings after that time, Constantine and Helena are depicted looking very much like Jesus and Mary. And so what he did was a brilliant political move to cement his position as not only the political, but the temporal leader of the empire. And if you disobey the rules and laws of the empire, you are disobeying the laws of God himself, and you will be cast into an eternal pit of damnation. And so that's where the hell concept comes from. And in the Afterlife Frequency, I take people through an understanding of where hell comes from. It's a fascinating and I dare say mythological journey, which is still used to terrify people to this day. But there may be no hell, but there is reincarnation. So everyone, be nice.
That's a beautiful note to end on, and you're doing a great job of pulling back the veil of ignorance. So how can people follow you and find out more about your work?
Certainly. I invite everyone to visit my website, which is afterlifefrequency.com, just like my latest book, The Afterlife Frequency. I invite you to sign up for my newsletter, and you'll also find out through my calendar of events everything I've got coming up. I'm doing a whole U.S. tour this year, and I'm always on tour. I also write for Best Holistic Life magazine, so you can find out about getting an online or paper subscription to that as well. So that's all at afterlifefrequency.com. And Jack, I want to thank you very much for having me on Mysticast. It has been an honor and a pleasure, and I hope someday to return.
Definitely would love to have you back. And if people want to learn more about the Aetherius Society, they can go to aetherius.org.